Hi everyone. We're here to talk about digital transformation in financial institutions. I'm joined by Vinay. My name's Thompson. I'm the head of digital product for HSBC here in Hong Kong. I look after the mobile banking app, the online banking apps, as well as a public website and some of our security and authentication platforms. I've been in financial services for about 15 years across a range of industries, including banking, wealth management, payments, and insurance. Vinny, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Hey, thanks, Corey. Hello, everybody. My name is Vinay Srivinas. I work with UBS. I run the digital transformation for APAC global markets. So I've been in the financial institution space for close to 23 years across various banks, but mainly on the capital market side. So it's going to be a good conversation with Corey today. We see how his banking side, retail banking side of things matches off with the institutional side of things that we do on the capital market side.
How different they are, or how similar they are, perhaps.
Yeah.
We've got a few questions that we're going to try to work through here. We wanted to start off by really just exploring where is the state of digital transformation today, and how have we seen that evolve over the last few years. Vinny, I don't know if you want to give us some thoughts on where are we and how is transformation different today than what it's a term that's been with us for some years now, but I'm sure you agree that it's starting to look different to what it used to.
That's true. So yeah, as Corey, as you said, there's digital transformation of people have been doing things in terms of technology, in terms of what kind of business process automation they could have, and things in an informal way. It's only recently that people have started putting a structure around this, and this digital transformation has become a big buzzword everywhere nowadays, in at least banks and the FinTech and everything coming through. So for me, digital transformation is three basic things. One is, what is the culture that you have? It's about the people trying to see, okay, am I doing things optimally? Is there a question that I need to go and unlearn things to do things well? What kind of technology that we could use? Technology platforms can we use? How can we actually enhance our client experience? How do we actually provide the best in class service for our clients without us doing much? And more importantly, in financial institutions, there's a big technology budget that everybody uses. How can you do more with less? As in, the marginal cost of change should be close to zero if you can. And that's where the markets are getting very competitive, at least the capital markets for us. The margins are shrinking. People are demanding bigger and bigger services with smaller costs. So these things really matter now. So that from a capital markets perspective, that's really important, how we actually manage this cost, as well as provide best-in-class service to our clients.
And you were saying doing more with less, and kind of having a sort of a next to zero incremental value. Maybe you could just, incremental cost to drive the transformation agenda. Can you just expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So, for example, all banks or financial institutions tend to have a bit of legacy systems. How do we actually, the processes that we have is we don't capture any data there. Quite a few of these things came from a paper environment. How do you go to paperless environment? And once you capture the data, what is the data that you have from your daily business processes? How can you get more value out of that? How can you get more value out of that for your clients? So, for example, the clients might be doing something with us. Is there some information that's embedded that they're not seeing that we can actually give value add service to them? Is there something that we are saying, okay, there's more happening in the market, the markets itself, the capital markets, what is happening? Are we capturing that data properly? Are we advising our clients the best way? So this is the area that everybody is a big win for, not just, it's merely from the client perspective that we want to go, but it's also from our own perspective. We want to see how can we actually minimize the inefficiency of the data or the platform that we have. How can we actually get maximum value from the investment that we get there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just picking up on that cost thing. I see it in some of the organizations I've been involved with, where these legacy systems carry a cost with them, and if you can make the change cost neutral in that, the amount of cost you take out you can use to fund the replacement of a better system that also gives you a better customer experience or more efficiencies, then these are the types of saves that we're looking for. I mean, when thinking back on over the years, transformation for me was very much was from a from and a to. If I go back 5 or maybe longer, 10 years, it was, we're going to do a 3-year program or 5-year even program of technology replacement, core system replacement. It's going to be a transformation from and to. Once we're done, we're transformed. We're finished, and but as we've seen that evolve, what I've noticed is the conversation shifted from being technically only to about technical and people, and even more to, and you mentioned some of these points around kind of mindsets and ways of working. And so what was something that was sporadic, point in time, point of departure, point of arrival type thing, I think people are starting to accept that it's something that never stops, never sleeps. I'm interested from your perspective in terms of how you see this evolving over time. So we're kind of pegging where transformation is now, and you've talked about people and culture, the role of technology as an enabler, really strong focus on client experience. How do you see this evolving? If we were to kind of put another peg in the ground, perhaps 5 years' time, what would be different?
So I think that's the difficult part for this digital transformation. You don't know where the things would stand in 3 or even not 5, even 3 years down the line. So as you said, this journey is a kind of a ever transforming journey that you need to keep continuing on that. So it's not that, as you said, it's not a from to to. The to is the goalpost, the peg is actually keeps changing on there. So the way I would see is that at least in the financial institutions, always we had when we think in the capital market side, we used to think, okay, this is going to be on the sales side. This is the kind of domain experience that we see, and this from a trading perspective, this is the kind of, okay, he understands the markets. But I think the traits or the skill sets that we're looking at is going to become more and more hybrid now. So the way people would say, okay, this is the data we've got, this is the client we've got, this is the markets they're focusing on, how can we combine these things? I think that's the combination where it will come. It's not that somebody else will come and build it for you, or they will build it for you, but that domain knowledge will be with the financial institutions. So when we always compare with, okay, the fintechs coming and getting into various sections of the financial sector, it's the domain expertise and experience matters a bit. The technology is that. So I think it's difficult to say it's okay, it's 60% of domain, 40% of this. You can't really put that, but this is a big component in there. And this is where I think and sometimes it's also, there's other aspect of that is in terms of somebody's already in the bank for a long time and their way of thinking has been set. So they think about, okay, this is a client we go with a pitch book, we do this. You sometimes need to unlearn. This is the thing that I was trying to mention early on. You need to unlearn what kind of things that they would like. The millennials coming in, the next kind of generation coming in, they want to see how is the maximum value add. Data never lies, or you could actually get different views from data, but actually it's the views that you actually provide to your clients. It's the views that you understand yourself, your own business processes. That's going to be the key part of how we transform.
And you're predominantly, you're in the institutional side of the universe, and you're quant sort of by background. But what you're kind of describing sounds almost like an overly used term, perhaps, but sort of that entrepreneurial mindset. So we're not just about, I mean, in the institutional world, having worked with some of my peers in Citi, there were sort of people were very deep but narrow experts in a particular domain. And what you're describing a little bit is sort of leveraging that, but being able to kind of move a bit more horizontally and connect things across the organization as well. What are the what does UBS do, or other organizations, to try to enhance that sort of horizontal collaboration? Because let's face it, incentive models aren't always built around this sort of stuff. Often it requires a bit of discretionary work, or building, investing in some sort of partnerships, friendships, relationships, networks across the business, and sort of at the odds potentially of incentive models sometimes. So how does the bank make that secret sauce work?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Corey. So You got a very fair point. So that's why digital transformation is always seen as a horizontal when we don't see it as a product silos and things like that, or division silos. They actually go across the products and the business divisions everywhere. And but it's such a big space that you need to understand that somebody in personal banking or retail banking could be looking at something in that location, and you would be doing something in the capital market side or in the asset management side. How do we bring all those things together? That discipline and the operating model that you want to have for that is really key, or else you'll end up doing just trying to solve the same problem again and again. And that's where I think this having a clear horizontal thing, this digital transformation, we actually talk to each other, even though we're looking at our business incentives. We also want to see what is the, again, as going back to our motto that doing more with less. So if you're if you see something, somebody else is being involved in something else, that's actually overlap for you. That's still less for you. So I think that collaboration angle becomes much bigger and bigger. And again, this does not even just stick inside of a firm as well. It's also sometimes you have this concept of mutualization. How could you actually work with other financial institutions and say, okay, if you're trying to solve the same problem, it could be KYC or anti-money laundering. Everybody's trying to solve the same problems. Can we do it together? Is there something that we actually go and say, okay, you're doing something, we do something, let's do it together. It's a shared cost. Would it actually go down? So those kind of concepts come in, and that will come in more and more aggressively going forward as shared services, I would think.
Yep.
Corey, just going back a little bit, I'm going to flip around some of the questions that towards you. So you've been on the institutional side now. You've actually moved on the retail banking side of things.
I've always been on the retail side, but when I was at Citi, we were looking at bringing together a retail trading platform, and the back end of that connected with the institutional, the markets part of the business. So we had we had some pretty close relationships. So I understood a bit about how that business worked, but I've always been a retail person. Yeah.
Got it. So is from my coming from an institutional background and a capital markets background, my view of the retail banking side is always the client experience, the user experience is the top in the pyramid when you actually think of digital transformation. Is that the case, or is it something else as well that we start looking at?
You can't get around. I mean, look, I think what I would say generally, and I'll unpack this a little bit more, but I think customers in the landscape and the focus towards experience, customers have been the big winners. And I think generally speaking across the board, experiences have lifted. There is no doubt that it's table stakes now to be the need to put out, for example, a mobile banking experience that is of a decent quality and caliber. Customers don't benchmark their banks against the other banks anymore. It's every other digital experience they have. It's Apple, it's Amazon, it's Netflix, and they're being conditioned to expect more. And I think the bar in which they're sort of holding banks account to measure this is increasing. So absolutely, there is a lot of focus around that, but as you would appreciate, there is only so far you can push the front end experience without kind of tripping over something at the back end. So there is an element of sort of simplification, organization around the interface that you can do, and you can push that quite far without having to go too deep in the stack. But for most banks, we're dealing with some level of legacy, or be it mainframe, we're talking 20 years plus systems, maybe older, that are, and depending on the bank, of course, that are going to impose some level of restriction on the ability to totally be sort of to think entirely freely about how you can drive that front end experience. So if I take HSBC as an example, the way we approach that is really kind of on a multi-level process. We're trying to continue to push and drive the front part of that experience as hard as possible. Anything net new that comes on, or any sort of upgrade to a relatively new system is typically architected on a modern stack, and it gives us the flexibility. But a lot of the core banking stuff still sits quite low, and of course we have longer dated modernization programs going around those, but that won't yield. That'll sort of be a multi-year yield, but end to end, you're probably looking at 3 to 5 years. So it's something that has to happen. But it's like a balancing act around how do you sort of shift your resources entirely to the back to fix that, entirely to the front end and never actually deal with some of these things and carry them along for years and years. And so we find ourselves trying to make intelligent decisions led by data, led by customer feedback around incrementally where's the next best area to invest our resources into. So without a doubt, I think the experience level across the board's lifted. Customers quite rightly have higher expectations, and from our perspective, we're really focused on that. But of course, it's the experience is not just aesthetics. It's the timeliness of the data, the accuracy of the information, the intelligence of the system, and this requires us to work further through the stack over time and really drive that a lot harder.
Got it. And I also do you think there's a bit of a certain Asian nuance to all the setup that you need in Asia compared to the global setup? Because some of the perception that I get is there's a lot more virtual banks coming up in Asia, and there's a lot more hunger and a lot more innovation happening in that space in Asia. Does that make things a little different in Asia?
If we're talking Asia generally, without a doubt, it's different. I mean, even if you look across, Indonesia is a very different animal to Singapore. You know, Vietnam's a really interesting kind of midway country that's sort of developing quickly and moving into digital. You have some other interesting dynamics in parts of Asia that you don't have in the West. For example, the population density, urban density in places like Hong Kong and Singapore. Probably lend themselves, in our case, we're still finding that the branch plays a really important role. You know, in my native Australia, that's a tougher economic decision to make because of just the sheer spread of people over a square kilometre, for example. So there's still a role, and we're thinking a lot about how we evolve the role of the branch. In terms of the virtual banks, I think all of the banks that have launched into the markets have done a great job. They're building their brands, they're acquiring customers. I think again they're raising the bar, and customers are the winner, both through the pressure they apply to each other and to the banks to kind of lift the standard. The pressure, competitive pressure they're applying around, you know, rates and offers. I think it's like listening to a lot of them speak, and I've been on various conferences with them over the last few weeks and months. I mean, they're all looking at this as a long game, and it's very difficult to kind of pick winners now. A lot of them are also, you know, based on the license, they're still largely single product plays. So we're going to need to see how that plays out over time. I think the other really interesting thing about the virtuals is they're generally part of a conglomerate, a partnership that bring non-traditional players into the mix. How are they going to leverage those? And likewise, you know, when I think about HSBC, I think we're continuing to evolve the digital experience. If we look across our app ecosystem, we have a standalone trading app. We've got a rewards app that's really connected to the card experience. Of course, the banking app. We also have PayMe, which has got over 2 million customers in the payment space as well. Now it's a separate unit, but we see that as part of the HSBC ecosystem, and we're constantly trying to work out how we best connect these things up and make it a much more seamless experience for a customer to move between these more vertically specific plays, as well as we see the mobile banking app as kind of being the centerpiece that kind of anchors it all together.
Got it. Okay.
Maybe if I can flip the question back to you, Vinny, in terms of the institutional landscape. So, you know, in the insto space, particularly in the trading world, we would have had traders on the trading floor. They'd be looking at data, identifying signals, making decisions. You know, this is what they were sort of trained and made you know, careers out of. Then we had algorithms being introduced and models, very much in your world, where some of this stuff is now being allowed to be, you know, executed on the base of a model perhaps. And now we've got learning, you know, machine learning and models that learn and continuously refine. I'm interested to understand how you see this changing the role of the people in the institutional space, if at all.
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that question. We actually won the Quant House of the Year for machine learning based pricing model this year. The
I didn't
main
know
thing
that.
from the main thing that we do is that the key dependency on a particular trader and things like that, that dependency will keep going down. It's the, as I was mentioning earlier, the traders trading community will become more and more tech savvy. They would be exploring and visualizing data a lot more. So you need to have your data collection, your data lakes, your analytics there ready for them to be able to use that. And it won't be that, oh, I know this is going to go down, I'm going to sell today and things like that. That kind of mentality, and it's going to be a lot of high frequency decisions that's going to be going. So what's slowly happened over the past few years is the algos have moved from a decision support to actually decision making, and then now actually they will start doing more of the automated trading as and when possible.
Right.
And this is not does not come for free, because you can't really put a black box model and say, okay, I'm going to do the trading, because there's some market obligations that all the institutional players have, that you can't be causing any market. So there's a lot of there's some regulatory scrutiny around that, but there's also, how do you actually get your model validation? How do you actually test it? How do you make sure that it doesn't cause any market discrepancies? Those things are really, really important as well. And the regulatory checks and the reporting that you need to do. It's almost as if you have a person doing the trading, but it's a bot basically. And that's where I think the extra care needs to be taken.
Got it. I'm conscious we're out of time. It was a fast 20 minutes, but it was great talking with you. And hopefully whoever watches this is going to enjoy it and find something interesting in there.
Hey, thanks, Corey.
Great.
Thanks for
See you.
everybody. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, everyone.